Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. I'm Ocean Robbins, and this next interview is with our guest, Chuck Carroll. Chuck Carroll, also known as the weight loss champion, is no stranger to weight loss struggles. His mission to lose 275 pounds and improve his health took him on an incredible journey that's inspired and motivated thousands of people. The confidence he gained from the weight loss enabled him to pursue his dream of becoming a reporter for CBS News and NBC News Radio. He even spoke on Capitol Hill to share his remarkable weight loss journey. Now Chuck is the host of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine's popular podcast, The Exam Room. In the interview you're about to see, we'll be talking with Chuck Carroll about obesity and why so many people are overweight. We'll look at some of the often hidden forces that are driving obesity and what the science says about what works to turn it around. We'll also look at how to harness the power of diet for vitality and radiance. Chuck, it's so great to be with you.
Oh man, I feel like this is so long overdue. It's truly my honor.
Well, let's start with your story, which is pretty remarkable. Tell us a little bit, I'm sure you've told this a lot of times, but I'd love to hear it fresh here. Tell us a little bit about your health journey, where you were, what you were struggling with first. Let's capture that before picture, what you were facing.
I mean, I was not the man I am today, that is for sure. Would you believe that I was put on blood pressure medication when I was 14? Just a sophomore in high school. Already my blood pressure was like 180, 190 over 100, sometimes even 110. And the doctors were so concerned, they put me even at that tender age on blood pressure. Is because like my diet was the standard American diet, copious amounts of fast food, ultra processed food, just on steroids. And I did not know at that time that for me, my particular experience, and I'm sure a lot of people watching share the same story, food is as addictive as any drug out there, and it got its hooks in me, something fierce. And so by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was already having chest pains. I was 420 pounds, and I'm 5 foot 5 inches tall on a good day. So I have a 66-inch waist at that point, and my prospects, even for living to see 30, were just not that good. Pretty scary to be that young age, knowing heart disease runs in your family and already having chest pains.
Wow, yeah. So what catalyzed your making a shift?
Oh, so many things. I mean, one, it's just the wear and tear that puts on you mentally, physically, everything about it. And there's never one thing. Everybody always wants to know, what's that straw? You know, what was it that broke the camel's back? And it's so much. And anybody who's being honest will tell you it's more than one thing. It's being embarrassed that you can't go a single day without going to the drive-thru and being on a first-name basis with the people at Taco Bell, just like Norm was on Cheers when he would walk through the door. Norm! For me, as they see my car pull into the drive-thru, they'd see that little blue Chevy Aveo and they know, oh, there's Chuck. Let's get his $20 order ready. And it never wavered. And so that's embarrassing. But then also dating a girl who refused to tell her friends, our colleagues, family member that we were dating. She was ashamed to be with somebody who was my size, but then me justifying that, thinking that that was as good as I could do. And so here I am in my 20s, supposedly the prime of my life, and just my emotional state, my self-worth was for nothing. Mm-hmm. And then also, you know, there was the intervention that my friends had organized for me, because I was actually on the radio. This is a funny story, working in Washington, D.C. for a radio station. The call letters, I can't make this up, WBIG. So you want to talk about the perfect place to work to lean into being Big Chuck. Mm-hmm. This was it. But I was paid to endorse a fad diet, but could only go 3 days without breaking this diet and then doing a clandestine middle of the night run to the drive-thru, loading up and having this epiphany like, oh my God, I'm so addicted to food, like so many other people I know who have expressed their struggles with substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs. For me, it was this similar detox. And so knowing that you're in that state and then just not being able to fit on an airplane seat, man. I remember like flying across the country and praying for weeks leading up that I was going to be able to fit into this seat. And then suddenly having this moment where I realized as I boarded the plane that day, I wasn't the only one praying. Ocean, like I had the entire plane was praying, but please God, don't let this guy sit next to me. And so when you're carrying that burden of being with somebody who refuses to acknowledge that you're in a relationship because they're ashamed to be with somebody who's your size, but justifying it, thinking that that's as good as it gets, you're already having the chest pains. You know that you're willfully addicted to food, and then nobody wants to sit next to you. And they look at you like you're just some leper. You put all of those things together. And that was the catalyst for change because I knew that that's not sustainable. That's not the life that I wanted to lead. And I knew at that point changes had to be made.
But you were addicted to fast foods.
Man,
you know? So that's not something you can just be like, that's not just a question of willpower.
No.
Now, what was the strategy? What was the intervention that actually had that shift? Was it a cold turkey kind of situation or was it one step at a time?
It was forced cold turkey because at that point, and it was still years after this epiphany that I made the decision to have weight loss surgery because my only goal in life at that point was to live to see 30 years old. And this is all I knew how to do was to have weight loss surgery because members of my family had had it. I had friends who had had it, and they all had short-term success. And then gradually put the weight back on. And I thought that would be my fate, but at least I could go to my grave saying that I had tried everything. I had tried everything. But the difference between people who have had the surgery or actually go on any diet and then have long-term success versus those who are destined to repeat this vicious yo-yo dieting cycle is that they make those changes that they ultimately have been trying to avoid their entire life. And it boils back to what you were taught as a little kid. It's like you got to eat your vegetables and you have to exercise. And it does not have to be any more complicated than that. The diet and lifestyle is what it always boils down to, no matter what you do initially to start. So whether it's weight loss surgery or right now weight loss drugs are all the rage, or if it's a fad diet, it doesn't matter. Long term, you're looking at diet and lifestyle interventions, and that's the key to success.
So post weight loss surgery, what was your weight down to? And then what was kind of the journey from there?
Oh man, it dropped pretty quickly because I'm a competitive guy, and we would have these groups every week, mandatory for the first year after surgery, where everybody who had it would get together and they'd talk about their trials and their tribulations, what worked, what didn't. And I always wanted to be the leader in the room. And while other people were starting to reintroduce like Swedish fish, I'll never forget the day a woman pulled a big old bag of Swedish fish out of her purse. And she was so happy that she could eat this candy again. And the nutritionist, I will never forget, she said that day, she's like, well, you can have some, just watch how much you eat. And then the next week, somebody else brought a big bottle of Sprite and they were drinking it. Like, it's okay to drink this, and boom, out comes the contraband. And so slowly, over time, you started to see more and more of these unhealthy foods introduced into this group setting. And the message that we were being told was moderation, moderation, moderation.
But this isn't just what they're binging on late at night. This is like bringing alcohol to an AA meeting.
That is exactly what it was like. And even at that time, to me, it made zero sense. Because let me take you back a few years to when I went on that fad diet, and I only went 3 days. Well, in the middle of the night, when I had reached such a rage at day 3 that I was feeling sick physically. I was like in emotional funk, but then just a wreck, freaking out because I hadn't had Taco Bell. I punched my fist through a wall. I was a rage of emotion. And when that didn't calm me down, I punched my fist through a door. And that's when I was like, a couple hours later, I'm going to go to Taco Bell. I'm going to get my fix, and that's going to solve everything. And it did. But it also came with the epiphany of, again, being hooked. And immediately, once I took that first bite, I was happy. I was feeling sick, and that went away, and my emotions lifted. But then there was also that extreme sadness that came with it. That, man, I'm as hooked on this as people are to drugs. And so when I woke up from the surgery, and I had not planned this whatsoever, you get discharged a couple days later, I'm taking a nap, I wake up in my own bed, and when I wake up, somebody from my family had kindly gone to McDonald's and got me a black cup of coffee. You can have black coffee right away after this surgery. But I saw the arches, man, and I got pissed. I mean, I was just like, suddenly everything I saw in a much different light because I knew I did not want to go back there. And I didn't care if it was a cup of coffee, French fries, a caramel empanada from Taco Bell, a Big Mac. It didn't matter. I wanted nothing to do with that industry any longer. And so here we are 14 years later. I still have not had a bottle of water, a cup of coffee, a French fry, anything like that. And that has made a tremendous difference for me. It's just that abstinence. And when it comes to severe food addiction, it's not the message people often want to hear, but it's a God's honest truth, is that you have to look at it the same way, because you use that analogy of AA. It's like, nobody's going to tell an alcoholic, well, you can have one beer a week and you're going to be okay. Right. But when it comes to food, not only is that okay, like it's the starting point. I'm going to lose 20 pounds and then I'm going to go and I'm going to have that Big Mac or that chocolate cake. And then before you know it, they're right back at the starting line where they started, or even further back because they're in worse shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just don't look at food the same way.
Right. Yeah, Susan Pierce Thompson, who is also part of this summit, talks about bright lines. Like you just got to have those boundaries that are super crystal clear. And you can know what your bright lines are and then what your wiggle spots are. Yeah. But when it comes to an addiction, it's got to be cold turkey on that, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay. So when did you get to like your current weight, more or less?
It took about a year and a half after the surgery, and I got down to about like 175. And my doctor was like, "You're doing great. This is about where you need to be." Now, mind you, again, 175, 5'5". If you put that on the BMI chart, that's still going to tell you you're obese. But my doctor that day, he was like, "You've done so good. You need to eat a hamburger." Wow. The guy prescribed a hamburger for me like it was a script for blood pressure medication. Never ate the hamburger. Again, that's why I'm sitting here with you today as opposed to being back in my 66-inch pants. So it took a year and a half, but I was really diligent about watching what it was that I eat. I didn't know a whole lot about what it truly meant to be healthy. I just knew what unhealthy was at that point. So it's like, I'm just going to take all of that off of my plate. And so when people are like, well, where do you start? Where do you start? I was like, don't start just think about what's unhealthy. And you already know 9 times out of 10 what's unhealthy. So just take that off of your plate. And that's a great place to start. So a year and a half of just walking. Didn't even go to the gym. Like it just boils down to finding what works for you. And I just walked, got up to 5 miles a day every day on my lunch break. And that, coupled with healthier eating, voila, the weight came just melting right off.
What is it like for you now to be in a more right-sized body? How does that feel, having been where you've been, to be here now?
Every morning I wake up and it's kind of like, is this life? Is it life that I can go into my closet and I can find obnoxious, bright pink suits like this and I can buy them off the rack and I just love it. And like, it's just kind of how life is supposed to be. And because I feel comfortable in my body now, it's giving me confidence to do all kinds of amazing things that I never thought were possible. And it's so much more than just a weight loss journey. It's so much more than just a health journey. Now it's just life's journey. And that's the most epic journey of all. So it is fantastic. And I tell everybody, come on in. The water's fine. The water's fine. Just get here.
Beautiful. And so for anybody who's struggling with weight and thinks there's no hope,
there's always hope.
There's always hope.
If you're drawing breath, there's always hope. You don't have to put it off to tomorrow. Start today. Everybody's like, well, I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to start next week. And then you find an excuse why not to start next week. And I'm going to start tomorrow. No, start now. Just start now. And it's not going to be easy. If it was easy, nobody would be in the pickle that they're in. But you know what? There's nobody who successfully lost weight or had amazing health transformations. There's nobody featured on this summit right now who has anything extra than anybody else. If you're watching this, you already have the same tools in the proverbial tool chest as anybody else, which means you can accomplish it just like everybody else has done. And then you can be a leader, that beacon of light for others. And that's the greatest thing of all.
So that beacon of light for others, and that says a lot about you, because not only did you have a personal transformation, but you didn't just be like, okay, now I can be happy over here, right?
Right.
You was like, okay, how do I help other people have this?
Yeah.
So tell us about that. What spark got lit in you that led you become an ambassador?
Man, that goes back to life's journey just being epic. So once I lost the weight, I got to ask myself the question that we're asked as a kid in elementary school: what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, I always loved sports. So I started a sports media company. I started covering the NFL. And I started doing shows with a lot of the players. And then they gave me the nickname, the weight loss champion, and the story spreads. I get hired by a major news organization, and I start going away from sports and start covering regular news. And I'm having the time of my life covering some of the biggest stories in the world, like chasing the Pope around Washington, D.C. Who gets to do that? I don't know. I did for a few days, and it was epic, right? But then eventually, day to day, so much of that reporting was on stuff that was just, it didn't jibe with where I was in life. It's death and destruction and talking to people literally on the worst day of their life, where they've lost somebody so close to them. And I didn't want to do that anymore, right? Like, it's cool to be able to say, oh, well, I report for CBS, or, oh, I'm on the radio for NBC. Nice. However, you take a lot of that baggage home with you.
Yeah.
And I noticed a shift in my mood. But I still love to be behind the microphone. I love to be in front of the camera. And so I just approached the physicians committee. And I was like, guys, what can we do to work together? Do you have a podcast? And so eventually we came up with the idea for what became the exam room. And so now I get the opportunity to interview other people who've had amazing health transformations, and doctors and experts who just have all of this wonderful information to bestow to people to get them going on their own journeys. And we're changing lives. I mean, as we record this, we've been downloaded 15 million times on podcast, viewed 100 million times on YouTube. And it's just the letters of gratitude that pour in from all over the world are the greatest thing of all. It really does. It's the coolest thing, man. The coolest thing.
So wonderful. Stepping back to the big picture for a moment, we know more about food and health than any population in the history of the world. We have access to tens of thousands of studies published in peer-reviewed medical journals that tell us what to eat and what not to eat, more or less. And yet we have probably the highest rates of chronic illness of any population in world history, and the highest rates of obesity of any population in world history. In fact, in the United States, it's now more likely that you will be overweight than right-sized body. Like most people, 2/3 of our population or more is overweight or obese. So how do you juxtapose these two realities? How do we know so much and yet have worse outcomes?
All right. Here comes where people, I hope, don't misinterpret what it is I'm trying to say. It is a very complicated and loaded question. I think that obesity has become so normalized, and there is a lot of upside to the body positivity movement, and nobody should ever be made to feel less than. God knows I experienced my fair share of fat shaming looking back. But because things have been so normalized and people would rather just pull the wool over their eyes when it comes to body composition, it's a really hard pill for people to struggle. And so it makes it easier for us to celebrate this unhealthy diet that we have. Even if it's a plant-based food, not all plant-based foods are necessarily healthy. I mean, you can't tell me, that a lot of, these fried vegan offerings that are frozen in the grocery store are healthy. They're not. But I never want anybody to feel less than or ashamed of who they are. But at the same time, like, I love you and I hope that you are super happy. But if I would go back and tell myself, dude, you're 420 pounds. You're as good as anybody else, but your health is in the tank. And it's possible to have like really strong confidence about who you are, but then also accept the reality of the situation. And I think that we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable having those conversations with people, because those are conversations born out of love. Never call somebody a fat, excuse my language, but it's like, hey, I'm concerned about you. And just open the door. You don't have to hammer it home every single day. And you can also lead by example for yourself. But you can't keep sugarcoating the truth. You just can't do it, because that is a big part of why we are in the position that we're in, coupled with the fact that there's a whole heck of a lot more money in the drive-thru than there is growing kale. And that's just another undeniable fact. So we really have a lot of things kind of working against us in terms of our health. But the one thing that nobody can take away from us is our knowledge. And we have that in abundance. So it's up to guys like you, the Summit, myself, to keep putting that knowledge out there.
I'd like to turn for a moment to appearance.
Yeah.
Because of course beauty can become skin deep sometimes, right? Where it's very shallow, and it's very glossy, and has very little to do with what's on the inside. And so we could say it's what's on the inside that counts, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, sometimes what's on the outside is an expression of what's on the inside, right? So sometimes, for example, hair, skin, nail problems, or weight problems could actually be living external expressions of internal issues that could be showing up as cardiovascular problems or diabetes issues, insulin resistance, etc. Right? So, how do you hold that, and can you speak a little bit to sort of beauty from the inside out and what that means to you?
I think that, we can really simplify this. I'm sure that you have experts on here can really quote some fancy, impressive scientific terms, but I always like the analogy, you put good in, you get good out. And that begins with, your physical health, but also your appearance, right? If you're not filling your body with all of these high-fat, greasy, high-sugar foods that can cause all kinds of skin issue and hair loss and acne and things that, we just look at a society and we're like, I don't want that for myself, right? But if you eat a little bit healthier, odds are, we can keep it really simple and you're going to look better, you're going to feel better as well. You're just going to kind of have that natural glow from confidence and like healthy skin. It really, to me, doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. I'm not going to pull 18 million studies for y'all to look at and say, well, yeah, here you go. Look at that. Dairy increases your risk of acne by X%. It's like, no, just don't drink that glass of milk and odds are your risk of acne is going to go down. Boom, end of story. Does not have to be any more complicated than that.
What about the microbiome piece for a second here? Like, do you think that your microbiome now is very different than it was 20 years ago? And tell us a little bit about how you think microbiome impacts weight gain and weight loss, or is impacted by weight gain and weight loss.
Our mutual friend, Dr. Will Bolswitz, Dr. B, really turned me on to the microbiome. And I asked him on the show, how different did he think, as an expert, my microbiome is today versus when I was eating 10,000 calories of evil every day. And he's like, man, it's almost indescribable. Because when you're talking about eating all of that fat and just junk food day in and day out, I mean, there's so much bad, unhealthy gut bacteria that builds up in there. And now it's crowded out. I mean, like my microbiome has done a 180. And to know that like so much of your mental health, your physical health, your appearance, we were just talking about, all ties into that. I mean, like I've got like a happy gut now, man, compared to like my gut might as well have been on Prozac back in the day. And it definitely all plays together. That gut-brain connection is so strong. And so thinking back to food addiction, it's really your brain's going haywire, but that's being driven by the messages being sent from your gut. That unhealthy gut bacteria is like pinging your brain overtime, like, feed me more, feed me more, feed me more, feed me more. And while my happy gut now loves kale, it loves plants, it loves healthy food, I'm not losing any sleep if I don't have kale and quinoa for dinner. You know what I mean? But I couldn't go without that Taco Bell. So what does that tell you? Your microbiome is a powerful piece of work.
Do you eat any plant-based junk foods?
I really try not to, my friend. I really try not to. It goes back to just because it's vegan doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy. And so I look at that, I'm like, well, could this trigger me? I always view myself as once an addict, always an addict. And so I just don't want to open the door to a return to an unhealthy body, even if it's a vegan unhealthy body. That's just not a road I'm interested in going down.
A 2022 study found that 80% of Americans had been on a diet. 44% were on a diet at the time of the study. We also have data showing us that 99% of diets end in failure, which is to say they do not lead to long-term success in weight loss. And as you've said, they often lead to the opposite.
Yeah.
A sort of crash and burn cycle. So what are we getting wrong? It's not a lack of willpower.
No.
It's not a lack of shaming
No.
or even motivation. Like a lot of people are really stressed about their weight.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they're doing all these diets.
For
It's
sure.
why weight loss is a huge industry. What are we getting wrong?
People look at diets like they're a short-term thing, and they are. I'm going to go on this diet and I'm going to lose X amount of weight, but nobody plans for what comes after that. You can't stay on the keto diet your entire life. For me, when I was endorsing that on Big 100.3, it was something called the cookie diet. I wasn't going to stay on the cookie diet for the rest of my life. More recently, we've seen a surge in weight loss
Wait
drugs.
a second. The cookie diet.
I'm telling you, Ocean.
Now do tell.
Okay, rewind. All right, here we go. The cookie diet was this magnificently designed, and I'm going to use magnificently in quotes there. Draw your own conclusions as I explain this. A cookie for breakfast, you drink a lot of water with that, and that's supposed to keep you full till lunch. Another cookie at lunch, you drink a lot of water with that, and that's supposed to keep you full until dinner. And then you eat this sensible dinner. They don't define what a sensible dinner is. They just say make sure that you're eating some vegetables. Okay. So with no real guidance anywhere, off we go on this cookie diet. And the cookies, man, they weren't Oreos, they weren't your mom's chocolate chips, and they certainly weren't grandma's oatmeal raisin. These were garbage cookies, man. They tasted like a sponge that was on top of your kitchen sink. And if you were lucky, there was a little sprinkle of cinnamon and a raisin in one of them, but that was it. And they did not keep you full, especially, I think, probably because my stomach was so large at that point. You're telling me this one little cookie is supposed to carry me? Like, that's not happening, Jack. No wonder I only made it 3 days. Like, that was part of it. So it was just a really poorly crafted idea that to this day still exists, but I have not heard of anybody long-term having success on this. As a matter of fact, the shop that I was endorsing locally folded pretty daggone quickly. Sorry, it didn't work, guys. But yeah, that's the cookie diet, man. You tell me, do you think that's sustainable?
No.
No.
But I can think that it could be monetarily sustainable because it sounds like there's some marketing that can get behind
That's
that.
a cookie. Who doesn't like a
People
cookie?
want to hear good things about their bad habits, right?
Of
The
course.
donut diet, same thing, right?
Exactly the same thing. So it's just clever marketing and smoke and mirrors, but you're not going to get to that long-term solution.
Yeah.
So again, it's a short-term fix, which goes back to, well, we need to rethink what the term diet is. I have not been on a diet for many, many, many years. However, I have been eating the same diet now for many years, and the long-term success is fantastic. So when you look at the way the word diet was originally intended and you apply it in that regard, that's how we should be, long-term. And there are a world of opportunities for you to create your own diet and find what works for you. Eating a plant-based diet, which works great for me, doesn't mean eating salad every single day. I love salad, but you know what? Even if I do, it's going to be a different salad every single day. I'm going to throw different roasted vegetables in there every single day. That's what makes it sustainable, because it's Chuck's diet, or maybe it's Ocean's diet. It could be anybody's, it could be your diet. You just have to find what works for you, apply the principles of what healthy truly is, and then work within those parameters. But they're limitless. And that's why anybody can be successful long-term. You just have to rethink what diet actually means.
What are some of the underlying physiological mechanisms that trigger food addiction in our hormones, in our, perhaps even our subconscious wiring as creatures that needed to seize at any opportunity for calories, for survival? What do you think are some of the factors at play here that converge to create a force bigger than most people?
I think that evolutionarily speaking, we have been hardwired to love fat, and we have been hardwired to love sugar, and I think we have been hardwired to love salt. And so you put those three things in your body, those are highly addictive substances. And so because back in the day when food wasn't as abundant as it is today, we had to hold on to those things. Like if you get nuts, like super great. Fat sources, like let's eat it, let's store it, great. But 200 years ago, it's not like you could go out and just buy a jar of dry roasted peanuts or honey roasted peanuts or chocolate covered almonds, right? But you can blow through a whole bag or a whole jar, no problem. You could go to the drive-through 5, 6, 7 times a day if you want and really load up. And so while our access to food has changed drastically over the past century or so, evolutionarily speaking, we're talking about millions of years. So you tell me, can our bodies physically change to undo 1,000,000 years worth of evolution in just the span of 1 century? No freaking way. So we're like hardwired to hold on to these things and to crave it, and your brain loves it and it operates off of that and it wants more and more and more and more. But we are smart enough in present day to know that we should be limiting these. And I'm not saying that it's the easiest thing in the world, because we are introduced to that at a very young age and we get hooked at a very young age. And so we just have to be cognizant of that and make healthier decisions. Again, it's a really simple answer to a very complicated question, but you don't have to be a doctor or have a PhD or a dietitian to really understand that sometimes simplicity is the key.
What really causes insulin resistance?
Oh man, we talk about this with Dr. Neil Barnard all the time, and this shocked me because there are so many people who I love in my family, in my life, who have diabetes. And I always thought it was sugar, man. Sugar, 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 just like everybody else. But it's like the fat gets gunked up in the cells, and there is a fancy word, intramyocellular lipid, that you can throw out there, where literally that's just the fat clogging up the muscle cells, and the insulin can't get in there, and thus your blood sugar gets thrown all kinds of out of whack. The sugar isn't the thing that's gunking up the cells, it's the fat. So when that fat gets in there and it clogs things up and the sugar can't get absorbed, then boom, like there you go. It's not the sugar, it's the fat. And in the standard American diet, where fat is in abundance and a lot of fat is found in these sugary foods, sugar gets the blame, but it's actually the fat that does it. I had no idea until I started doing this particular part of my journey, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. That makes an awful lot of sense. And if you think about it, how much fat is the average person eating in a particular day? A ton. And that's why you're seeing diabetes rates through the roof.
So I know you're not a doctor, but what's your prescription? What's your recommendation for people who are just starting out on this journey? Do you say, okay, go cold turkey tomorrow? What do they do? What do they not do?
So here it is, right? I am very much an all in or all out, just jump in the deep end, pinch your nose, sink or swim. More often than not, you're going to find that you can swim. That's my philosophy. Other people like to gradually, taper off. But if we're talking about going back to food addiction, if we're talking about tapering off, there are studies that show that people who go cold turkey tend to have longer term success. That's what has worked for me. So I say go cold turkey, and it's not going to be easy. I never tell anybody it's going to be easy, and there are going to be cravings, and they are going to be intense, and you are going to wish that you were anybody or anywhere else. But what works to this day, and believe it or not, here we are 14, 15 years into my journey, I still get intense cravings. The old big, 420-pound brain kicks in. Just giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable and accept the fact that you're having those cravings makes it so much more easier to deal with. You're not a freak. You're not the only person in the world who is having these intense cravings. There's nothing wrong with you. As a matter of fact, the fact that you're having this craving means that you are perfectly normal. So don't beat yourself up. Just give yourself permission to be in that moment, be with those unhappy, unhealthy, just agonizing cravings. And when I'm talking to my guy friends, I'm like, guys, this is what we're going to call it. Accept the suck. Accept that right now, your life sucks. For these 15 minutes when that craving hits, your life is going to suck. You're going to wish that you're anywhere else. But the craving's going to pass, and then life's going to be grand again. So give yourself permission to accept the suck. It makes it more palatable, and soon enough the time passes. And that's how you deal with those cravings, because cravings can kick in for anybody at any time. You're not a freak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. And painful, but also profound.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about how in any pain that we face in life, fighting it doesn't make it go away. It actually makes it sometimes 10 times worse.
Yeah.
When there's a sense of acceptance or peace around the pain, it gets easier. And people who work in hospitals, who are dealing with people in intense pain, like breathing, calming. When people are scared, it's like they tighten around the pain and it gets so much worse. And so as you're talking about that, I'm thinking, oh, when we have those cravings, some people the brain can quickly say something's wrong, must get food now.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And that's that 420-pound brain, as you put it, But then there's also a place that says, oh, this is a natural part of the process, and I'm just going to breathe into it and let there be peace there. Interesting when you said it can happen at any time. I've interviewed a few people who had major transformations, lost tons of weight, got their life back, got off blood pressure meds for a couple of years, and then they went back. And what's so interesting is they knew what was at stake. They knew what was possible. They knew how much better they felt. But something in that brain just sucked them into it. And of course, we see lots of cigarette smokers who quit. And then 10, 20 years later, they have one cigarette and boom, they're hooked again. Right? Same with alcoholics. So it seems like this is the kind of thing, as they say in AA, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic.
Always.
You just remember that anytime you've been addicted to anything, you've got to hold that line, right?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I can talk about that for a number of experiences, but I have this thing, I call it the one nacho theory, where, and this goes back to one of my other failed diets, one of my many. And I just lost a lot of weight, primarily through exercise alone. And I thought that I could have just one nacho. I was trying to eat a little bit healthier, but I did. I had one nacho. And that one nacho was like, ooh, I'm okay. Let me dunk another one in this nacho cheese. And so now I had another nacho, and then another and another and another. And then pretty soon, $20 a day back at Taco Bell, eating these enormous burritos that we would make at the restaurant. I mean, the size of a football, man. And it was just, boom, all the weight came back on so fast because I lulled myself into that false sense of security that I could have one nacho.
Yeah.
But again, you look at that in the same light as you use the cigarette analogy. You're right. You can pick back up. Oh, I can have just one. No, you're going to have a pack tomorrow. Same thing with alcohol. You can't have just one beer. You're going to have one and then another, no matter how long it's been since you had that last drink. And so never lull yourself into that false sense of security. But the way that our society is shaped, again, with food, it's so hard for so many of us to look at food in that same light. And so if there's one thing that I really hope people take away from today, or if they ever listen to the podcast, it's like, look, food is so much more powerful than you think. It can be the greatest superpower in the world, or it can drag you right on down. And it kind of is every time, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It is like a fight, good versus evil when it comes to your health. But you can always make a choice for good. Always. Not easy, but you can always make it.
There was a major potato chip brand whose slogan for a time was, bet you can't eat just one. What goes through your mind when you think about that messaging, when you think about the processed food industry's hiring of experts to essentially get people hooked on their products?
Oh, here's where a little angry Chuck comes out. There's a reason why they say that. Like, they are playing with your mind, and they know damn good and well that they have created, and I'm going to use that word, created, that chip to ensure that you can't have just one. They know how the mind is operated. They know just the right bliss point, the right amount of crunch, the right amount of salt. I mean, they have poured hours and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into creating this chip so you can't have just one. They want you to get hooked. They are no different than cigarette companies or alcohol companies that advertise this stuff and show a great time if you smoke this. If you drink this, you're gonna have the greatest life ever. And you never see a miserable, sad sack eating just one potato chip in the commercials. No, it's a bunch of friends around and they're having the time of their life eating just one potato bowl. They're eating the whole thing. It is not an accurate representation of what happens when you eat that one chip. What happens when you eat that one chip is eventually you wind up on blood pressure medication at 14 years old. You wind up knocking on death's door when you're in your mid-20s. You wind up with a 66-inch waist, can't walk more than 10 feet without your chest starting to tighten. But you know what? I bet you can't eat just one. You're right, I can't. And that's exactly why I was in the position that I was in. And that seems like an extremist viewpoint, but I'm telling you, anybody who takes a step back and looks objectively at that for 1 second will see the truth for what it is. And what it is you are being preyed upon, you are being manipulated, and they want your money, and that is the only thing that they care about. That's it. They don't give a about you.
The prevailing medical and dietetic establishment focuses a lot on moderation. The messaging essentially is anything's okay in moderation, balanced diet, diversity, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so they would look askance at binge eating. But in fact, some would say that it's a medical condition when people are over-obsessed about healthy eating.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the science and the studies, and we know where the path leads, obviously one potato chip isn't going to kill anybody.
No.
But if it opens the floodgates to bags and bags of chips and Taco Bell runs and all the rest, it might, right? So given that, we still have a dominant system where most of us are told by the objective health authorities of our day that it's all about moderation. Why do you think that's happening? And what do you want to say to the health authorities that are piping that message out?
Guys, it starts with just education. I mean, I can't tell you how shocked I was to learn that when it comes to curriculums in medical school, that nutrition is nowhere to be found, essentially. You know, I was talking to a doctor just earlier today, and they were saying they got all of 15 minutes in their entire time in medical school of nutrition education. And so if the doctors who are leading our health charge aren't being taught about this, how are they even to know that this whole idea of moderation when it comes to junk food is going to be any different? That's why after I have bariatric surgery and I go to the group and the dietitian is saying to these patients who has struggled, they were up like 500-600 pounds and they're back to eating candy and junk food. They're saying, you're okay, just have a little bit. Bull, excuse my language. I know good and well that these are the people who are going to be back for that second surgery. But because the people who are leading our health charge themselves are not educated, how could they possibly be expected to bestow good advice to their patients? And so it has to start with our doctors in medical school, and even take it back to high school and middle school. Just find a way to reach the kids so they can understand the ramifications of the choices that they're making today. They are not immortal. Young Chuck Carroll was not immortal. Learn that lesson a lot sooner than other people might in life, but nobody's immortal, and you just have to find a way to reach people at a younger age. And if nothing else, get some good nutrition education into medical schools and get it there stat. Otherwise, those obesity rates are just going to continue to go through the roof, and these hundreds of thousands of people who are dying needlessly of chronic diseases every single year, every single month, they're no longer going to die. People are going to get their life back. And there's no better advertisement for eating healthy than a vibrant, healthy, long life.
Beautiful. What would you say, and you could say this right to the camera here, what would you say to people in our audience who are wondering, is it worth the trouble? And sometimes it's a lot of trouble to radically change diet and lifestyle. Is it worth the investment?
Yes, 100%. There's no question it is so worth it. Because you think that what's starting off as a weight loss journey will always be a weight loss journey. No. You get to be whatever it is that you want to be. Because once you get over that hurdle and you reach your weight loss goal, you know what? You have just done the most difficult thing you will ever do in your entire life, which means that every other challenge you have ever told yourself is impossible suddenly becomes possible, which means life is now yours to mold and sculpt and be whatever it is you always hoped it would be. So go out there and experience it. We only get to do this thing once, so make the most of it. It's not just the way you look, it's not just the way you feel, it's who you are. And you still have, as long as you're drawing breath, the opportunity to be whoever it is that you want to be. And no, it's not always going to be easy, but to know that it is attainable is sweet. So go, be healthy, achieve your dreams, feel great about yourself, inspire others. Just put in the work and accept the suck when need be, because the cravings are going to hit, but you're going to be fine.
We've been talking with Exam Room host Chuck Carroll. Chuck, your story is extraordinary. Your passion is profound. And, I think that the way that you have not only lived this journey, but are now bringing hope and possibility and positive results to so many other people's lives gives me hope for our species.
Thank you.
Because, there's plenty of suffering and suck in this world to accept. But you're not just accepting, you're also creating a whole other world of possibility. And I think that's how our species evolves.
Thank you.
So thank you for your wisdom, your leadership, your passion, and your partnership in the food revolution.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.